Mark Ruffalo's Bruce Banner is one of the most popular characters in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Don't get us wrong, Edward Norton was by no means terrible at the character, but it's fair to say most fans of the MCU are happy with how things turned out.
Thanks.
Banner is, of course, the alter ego of the Hulk and a core member of the Avengers, which makes him a very high-profile character whom even the most casual movie fans are, at the very least, familiar with. But there are some facts about Ruffalo's version of the character that only the most die-hard fans know, and we're gonna take you through just some of them in this video. Unless you're clued up on Marvel character movie rights, you're probably not aware of the fact that Mark Ruffalo is very unlikely to ever star in a solo Hulk movie. Universal currently has the rights to the Hulk, along with Namor, incidentally, and 2008's The Incredible Hulk is probably the first and last solo movie the big green guy will ever get in the MCU. So even though all the characters formerly tied up with Fox are now fair game for solo movies in the MCU, and even though Sony came to a deal with Marvel Studios to allow Spider-Man to appear in the franchise, the Hulk looks set to be a perennial supporting character, which is why the iconic Planet Hulk arc was reduced to being a subplot in 2017's Thor Ragnarok. Of course, there's also the fact that Hulk movies have never performed particularly well in terms of their box office success, which is incredibly important these days. On the subject of that Incredible Hulk movie from 11 years ago, when Edward Norton was cast to play Bruce Banner in it, Mark Ruffalo had actually been very much in the running for the role as well. In fact, it pretty much came down to just Norton and Ruffalo in the final stages of the casting process. This explains why Ruffalo was brought in almost immediately after Norton departed the MCU. Marvel Studios already knew exactly who they wanted. Norton had done a lot of tinkering with the Incredible Hulk script and rubbed the studio up the wrong way a lot during the filming. So ties were cut with him, and their second favorite initial choice, the much easier to work with Ruffalo, was given the green light to take over. In spite of the fact that Mark Ruffalo took the role of Bruce Banner from Edward Norton after the latter departed the MCU thanks to his irreconcilable differences with Marvel Studios, the two actors are actually good friends. They've been friends long before their respective Hulk days, and they still remain friends to this day. When he was asked about replacing Norton, Ruffalo was quoted as saying, "I'm a friend of Ed's, and yeah, that wasn't a great way for all that to go down. But the way I see it is that Ed has bequeathed this part to me. I look at it as my generation's Hamlet." That was certainly a nice way of putting it, and it puts to bed any rumors of animosity between the pair. Both actors have been successful since the big green torch was passed from Norton to Ruffalo, so why would there be bad blood? In Mark Ruffalo's own words, his version of Bruce Banner is kind of like an alternate universe version of Robert Downey Jr.'s Tony Stark, a version whose life went down a different route. Ruffalo has said that his Banner is like the fallen angel version of Tony Stark. He was the renegade professor who was kind of a rebel, arrogant, kind of doing things that were unorthodox. He continued by saying that there's a real admiration between the two of them that's interesting, and Tony Stark really enjoys the idea of watching this guy turn into the Hulk.
No surprises.
Ow! There's a lot of nice, fun play between the two of them. It's really no surprise that fans call the pair the Science Bros, and it's cool that the two actors are such good friends in real life as well. Yep, that's right, Mark Ruffalo's Hulk is half stripper. We know that sounds weird, so let us elaborate. Although the Hulk's body in the MCU is completely animated with CGI effects, the visual effects artists needed a reference point to start with. Given that they didn't just want to create a hugely muscular green body out of thin air, they used a real man to get the proportions right. And the man in question was a Long Island bodybuilder and male stripper by the name of Steve Rom. Of course, his face is still modeled after Mark Ruffalo's, which helps to retain his humanity after he goes green, meaning he's not 100% stripper. Incidentally, Rom was overjoyed that the Hulk was designed based on his torso, because the original Hulk, Lou Ferrigno, is one of his heroes, so much so that he even named his cat after him. For those of you who might not be in the know about the legend that is Lou Ferrigno, he's an actor and former bodybuilder who just so happened to play the Incredible Hulk in the television series of the same name in the late 1970s and early 1980s. In an homage to that fact, the Hulk's voice in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, at least when he roars, grunts, or does anything other than speak coherently, is a combination of both Mark Ruffalo's and Ferrigno's, whose voice is much deeper and more Hulk-appropriate than Ruffalo's.
You know, sometimes exactly what I want to hear isn't exactly what I want to hear.
Ferrigno played the Hulk in the days before CGI was a thing, alongside Bill Bixby's David Banner, and he became incredibly popular because of it. In fact, he even had an acting cameo as a security guard in 2008's The Incredible Hulk, as well as one as a similar character in 2003's Hulk movie. As we've already mentioned, Lou Ferrigno assists with the Hulk's roars, grunts, and any other animalistic sounds the big green guy makes. But whenever he has an actual line of dialogue, Mark Ruffalo delivers it all on his own, and even comes up with some of the lines himself. This began back in 2012 with the iconic Puny God line in The Avengers.
Puny God.
And in the years since then, with the Hulk's expanded roles in later movies, the actor has experimented even more with his dialect.
Hulk like fire, Thor like water.
In Thor Ragnarok, he was Hulk for most of the movie, so his vocabulary was developed to the point of being similar to that of a 5-year-old, meaning he was able to have conversations with other characters. Then in Avengers Infinity War, he even engaged in conversations between Banner and the Hulk for the first time in the MCU. Avengers Endgame may even see Professor Hulk appearing, meaning the Hulk will be talking like a normal person for the first time in a movie. As we've already mentioned, Bill Bixby portrayed David Banner, the Hulk's alter ego in the Incredible Hulk television series of the 1970s and 80s. When it came to developing his portrayal of Bruce Banner, Mark Ruffalo saw Bill Bixby's small-screen portrayal of Banner as a relatable everyman. Ruffalo has been quoted as saying, "I really loved the first TV version of it, the Bill Bixby one. I'm gonna shoot for that a little bit. He was an everyman in it. He's always on the run and trying to find love. It's really a sympathetic character before he turns into the Hulk and beeps everything up." The Bixby series was undoubtedly the most successful live-action adaptation of the Hulk before Mark Ruffalo came along. Everyone who grew up in the 70s remembers that show. It really was great. Mark Ruffalo's Hulk is obviously a movie character, but the actor doesn't actually approach each MCU installment like it's just another movie. He actually sees working on the MCU as similar to working on a TV series, just a big-budget, really slowly unfolding one. Ruffalo said, "Oddly enough, I joke with people that this is like doing a TV show where you shoot one episode every 3 years. There's a continuity to it, and when we talked about it with Marvel or Kevin Feige, we really do talk about it as the character's progression and where I've been able to have a lot of say in where it goes." He added that it feels like a long serial, which is nice, I think. And given the unprecedented number of movies in the MCU as a franchise, it really does make sense. The Hulk is certainly a respected member of the Avengers now, but he's also the most volatile, and without a doubt, the most difficult to communicate with. Natasha Romanoff has empathized with him and taken her time to gain his trust, but even she has her limits. He's the Avenger that all the other Avengers are most wary of, and in his own words as per 2017's Thor Ragnarok,
Earth hate Hulk.
but Mark Ruffalo believes the character is a full-on outcast. As such, the actor plays the Hulk with this in mind, telling Jimmy Kimmel that he's like the teammate none of them are sure they want on their team. He's a loose cannon. It's like, just throw a grenade in the middle of the group and let's hope it turns out well. It's okay, Mark. Steve Rogers would just jump on that grenade and everybody else would be fine. Unlike previous big-screen versions of Bruce Banner, meaning those played by Eric Bana and Edward Norton in 2003's Hulk and 2008's The Incredible Hulk, respectively, Mark Ruffalo actually plays the big green guy. Bana and Norton had to let their visual effects teams work their magic to render all of the Hulk's body movements and behavioral traits, meaning they could only play Banner rather than both sides of the character, and that undoubtedly took something away from their performances. But thanks to technological advancements in the world of VFX, Mark Ruffalo is able to play the Hulk through the art of motion capture. Prior to making his debut in the Avengers, Ruffalo expressed his delight about the whole thing, saying, "I'm really excited. No one's ever played the Hulk exactly. They've always done CGI. They're going to do the Avatar stop-action, stop-motion capture. So I'll actually play the Hulk. That'll be fun." As a general rule, actors get their lines before filming begins, because that makes sense, right? But when it came to Avengers Age of Ultron, Mark Ruffalo had to wait an unusually long amount of time to get his lines, because Joss Whedon wrote them last. And we're not just saying he was simply the last character to be written into the writing process, we're saying his lines were literally written during production. It's because Whedon didn't want to mull over what the Hulk was going to say too much, preferring to write his lines on a whim. About the situation, Whedon said, "What makes the Hulk so hard to write is that you're pretending he's a werewolf when he's a superhero. You want it vice versa, so the question is, how has he progressed? How can we bring changes on what the Hulk does?" And that's not just in the screenplay, that's moment to moment. Interesting! All things considered, Bruce Banner has appeared in 7 MCU movies to date. 2008's The Incredible Hulk, when he was obviously played by Edward Norton, 2012's The Avengers, the post-credit scene of 2013's Iron Man, 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, 2017's Thor Ragnarok, 2018's Avengers Infinity War, and the mid-credit scene of this year's Captain Marvel. In that time, the character has appeared on screen either as Banner or his green alter ego for a total of exactly 120 minutes to date. That puts him fourth on the list of characters with the most screen time in the franchise, behind Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, and Thor. Avengers Endgame will no doubt see that screen time increase dramatically, and given that Stark and Rogers are set to either depart the franchise or have reduced roles going forward, assuming Banner and the Hulk stays on, Ruffalo's character might be moving swiftly up the list in the very near future. There are countless comic books that are canon to the MCU, and Bruce Banner and the Hulk have appeared in a lot of them. So if you feel as though you'd like to read more of the Hulk's adventures, here are the MCU comics he's appeared in more of a capacity than just mere mentions, flashbacks, or, for example, his picture appearing on a computer screen.
The Incredible Hulk, The Fury Files. The Incredible Hulk, The Big Picture. The Avengers Prelude, Fury's Big Week. The Iron Man 3 Prelude. The Thor The Dark World Prelude. The Avengers Adaptation. The Avengers Age of Ultron Prelude. This Sceptered Isle. Avengers Operation Hydra. Thor Ragnarok Prelude. And the Avengers Endgame Prelude.
None of his appearances in those comics are as epic or as interesting as him punching a space whale, or being beaten down by Thanos, but they're still pretty cool. You've probably noticed that Mark Ruffalo plays his version of Bruce Banner with a self-deprecating sense of humor in the MCU. But there's a very good reason for that being the case. Ruffalo saw that as being part of the progression of the character, carrying on from where Edward Norton left off in his character's first appearance in The Incredible Hulk. Ruffalo wasn't just playing Bruce Banner how he would play him had he done so from the very beginning. He was playing the character's story arc as a direct continuation of Norton's. The actor explained, "We're just picking up where Ed left off. He's an older Banner now. He's been on the run longer. He's got to the point where he's tired of running, and he has a certain sense of humor about himself. And he's turning to face the monster within him, which he's been running away from." In a recent interview with entertainment website Collider, Mark Ruffalo was asked about what will happen between Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff now that Bruce Banner's back on Earth following his 3-year absence on Sakaar. The whole Tasha thing wasn't really explored in last year's Avengers Infinity War, since the heroes of the MCU had more pressing issues to deal with. But their relationship is apparently far from over, as Ruffalo explained in the aforementioned interview. He said they're star-crossed lovers, so it'll be something they're dealing with for the rest of their living days, I think. Watch this space, guys, Tasha is still very much a thing. While he was promoting 2015's Avengers Age of Ultron, Mark Ruffalo did something no other Hulk actor, or anyone else for that matter, has ever done before. He perfectly summed up the central conflict with the big green guy in one simple sentence. Ruffalo said, "There's a very cool thing happening. Hulk is as afraid of Banner as Banner is afraid of Hulk. And they have got to come to peace somehow with each other. Succinct and concise, right? The Hulk and Bruce Banner create an unusual paradox. They're two sides of a single identity, whereby the two sides are consistently at war with each other. And that aptly explains why the character is such a tormented soul." Mark Ruffalo's understanding of the Hulk's persistent internal conflict doesn't just come from his own experiences with the character. He also learned a lot from reading a very specific Hulk comic book run. For much of the character's publication history, the big green guy was an angry, mindless beast who smashed anything put in front of him. And while that has undoubtedly made for some fun and spectacular action sequences over the years, there's only so much mileage in that whole Jekyll and Hyde dynamic. Writer Peter David, who's also worked on titles like Aquaman, Young Justice, and Supergirl, understood that. And throughout his legendary run on the Hulk's comics in the 1980s, he set about incorporating some psychological realism into the character. It involved focusing less on the binary nature of Bruce Banner versus the Hulk, and exploring the gray areas, pun absolutely intended, in between. And Ruffalo cleverly took a lot of inspiration from that concept. Tom Holland might be the most infamous actor when it comes to giving away spoilers, but Mark Ruffalo isn't far behind. In fact, the Hulk actor is responsible for giving away the biggest spoiler in MCU history. Seriously, this one really takes the cake. Several months before Avengers Infinity War was released, Ruffalo spoiled the biggest aspect of the movie, the decimation. Whilst talking about the endings of Marvel movies, Ruffalo joked, "Wait until you see this next one. Everybody dies." Well, half, which prompted his co-star Don Cheadle to respond in absolute shock. That's not even remotely subtle, that's just an outright spoiler of the movie's epic ending. Thankfully, given that it seemed so out there at the time, not a lot of people took much notice, and those who did didn't necessarily believe he was telling the truth. But alas, he was. Oh, Mark, you crazy son of a gun. The MCU's long form of storytelling means we're seeing longer character arcs than ever before in superhero cinema. For example, Avengers Endgame will be the 22nd movie in the franchise, and its flagship star will be the character whose solo movie kicked the franchise off 11 years ago, Tony Stark. But arguably the character most suited to this long-form storytelling is the Hulk. The personalities of Bruce Banner and his green alter ego have been separate so far.
No Banner, only Hulk.
But they're now starting to overlap. According to Mark Ruffalo himself, right now the division between Hulk and Banner is starting to blur a little bit. And so you have a Hulk that can actually express himself without being angry. There's every chance Endgame could be the first time we see that happening properly. And it could result in an intelligent Hulk who has all the strength of the big green guy, but the mind of Bruce Banner. What a scary thought for the bad guys. Well, did you enjoy this video? What other interesting facts do you know about Mark Ruffalo's Hulk? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Screen Rant for more great videos like this one. We'll see you later.